Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, April the 3rd, 2025. Today I want to talk about Mars because Mars is doing something interesting. Mars is changing sign from a sidereal perspective. In other words, if we look at things from a sidereal view, the zodiac that is used in Vedic astrology, for example, we see that Mars is moving out of Gemini into Cancer. Now, of course, if we're looking at things from a regular tropical viewpoint, Mars is very much in Cancer, has been in Cancer for a long time, so it's not changing sign. But sometimes we do need to look at the sidereal zodiac as well as the tropical zodiac, and I want to ask, what this might mean for Mars changing sign, how we need to take it into account in terms of our own lives, and also how a few famous people might experience Mars changing sign. I also want to have another look at Marine Le Pen, because there are a couple of things I perhaps didn't fully clarify. And I think also with this Mars sign change might have some impact on Donald Trump and also the inauguration of the Trump regime. When he was inaugurated president, it has its Mars return at the moment, and that is something I do want to think about. So really, this video is mainly about Mars. But before I talk about Mars in detail, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Thursday, April the 3rd, 2025. Don't forget, if you enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. And if you are not subscribed, well, there's no harm in subscribing, is there? So here is the positions of the planets for today, which is Thursday, April the 3rd. As always, set for New York. And Moon is moving into, it's about to move into Cancer, and it's currently in late Gemini. And the Moon in late Gemini is making a square to Saturn, and it's making squares to Saturn, Venus, and Mercury, and the North Node. So the Moon in Gemini is about thought. It's about not taking things too seriously, and sometimes just skimming over the surface and not getting into emotional complications. But the Moon does make some square aspects which we can't really ignore, and those square aspects that the Moon makes to those Pisces planets, they are the main aspects of the day. And so with those squares, we might be challenged. Moon in Gemini square Saturn in Pisces. We might be quite happy to just go with the flow, saying whatever is on our mind, and then we come up against complications. Saturn in Pisces can represent those complications, and it just might be the human dimension. Some of us might skim over human emotion, human sensibilities, and that might be a mistake. So with Moon in Gemini, by all means, say whatever you want. By all means, think different things, but just consider who you're dealing with. Consider the emotional environment, because if you don't consider the emotional environment, you might trip yourself up. So that is a possibility. It depends on you to an extent. If you're someone who is very emotional, or someone who is comfortable with emotions and is quite sensitive, then possibly that Moon in Gemini square Saturn isn't going to be such a problem. Although Moon square Saturn, you might be very aware on what is holding things back, what is holding people back. So those are the main aspects. The Moon does change sign in the end. To be precise, it moves into Cancer at 10 minutes to midnight London time. So really, if you're in Europe or Asia or certainly Australasia, the moon is not going to be in Cancer today. On the other hand, if you're in the Americas, then late this afternoon, this evening, the moon will change sign. It will move out of Gemini, and probably that's going to be something of a relief. Things are going to become easier, and you're going to find it easier to sort of relax and be yourself, and there's nothing really that has to be done. So that's a viewpoint from the New York perspective. If we set that chart for Sydney, Australia, well, the moon is earlier in Gemini. Again, Sydney, Australia is a representative of Australasia, and the moon is at 17 Gemini, so the moon is almost still making that sextile to the sun. So maybe if you're in Australia or New Zealand compared with the Americas, it actually could be an easier day, especially the main part of the day. As you move into the evening, as the moon starts making a square to Saturn, then the difficulties might start to crop up, but maybe it's the end of the day already and you don't have to really worry about them. And then there is the heliocentric view, and here are things. If we put the sun at the center of the solar system, and not a lot going on. We have Saturn making a semi-sextile to Chiron. I mean, that is a pretty minor aspect, but Saturn semi-sextile Chiron, things might get us down. Not us personally, it's not personal at all. It's just people are a concern, and some of us might feel that we can't fully be ourselves with Saturn semi-sextile Chiron, because Saturn is in Pisces, Chiron is in Aries. Chiron in Aries is the principle of just doing our own thing, being a maverick, being an individual. But Saturn semi-sextile Chiron, something intervenes, something is demanding to be taken into account of, and that might cramp our style. And also, with Saturn semi-sextile Chiron, there may be a creeping sense of obligation. We would like not to have to worry about what's happening out there on the other side of the tracks, but we might have to worry about it. We might find ourselves obliged to worry about it, and it might relate to that universal concern for the suffering that is all around us. I don't mean in your personal life, the suffering that is around us, on this planet. And additionally, we have Venus opposition Chiron. So it adds to the message, doesn't it, with Venus opposition Chiron? Venus and Libra opposition Chiron and Aries. Remember, these are heliocentric positions, and with that opposition, something is interfering with our peace of mind. We'd like everything to be nice. We'd like to look away, but we can't look away, and it just may be a feeling that something has to be done. So now I want to move to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Thursday, April the 3rd, 2025. Aries. Aries, you continue to have a lot to say for yourself, and once you start talking about something, it can be difficult to stop. You are not someone who just talks for the sake of it, but you do feel at the moment that there is something to be said, and you may at times want to sort of wax lyrical, but there might come a point where you have to stop what you're doing or reconsider. You may be going in one direction. You may feel you want to go quickly in one direction, but something crops up that you weren't necessarily expecting that means that you have to reconsider. And so it might not be quite as easy to express yourself as you would like. Now, what might be in your way? Now, it might be your own feelings. We do have Moon in Gemini square Saturn in Pisces. From an Aries view, Saturn in Pisces can represent the unconscious. We think of Aries as a sign that is very, very gung-ho, likes to take the initiative, doesn't spend too much thinking and worrying about things. But, we're all connected to the collective unconscious. We've all got our own unconsciouses. And so there might be a sudden sort of reservation. We think we want to do something, but when we actually start to do it, or even when we start to utter some words, we immediately have second thoughts. And Aries, if there's something important to say, or you feel there's something important to say, then it's possible that you might be somewhat put off by the response. It just may be that your message is not fully appreciated. So you could say that maybe you've missed your chance. You had your chance to say what was on your mind, and now things should be slowing down. And the moon does eventually go into Cancer. Very late this evening certainly in the UK, the moon goes into Cancer. This afternoon, early evening in the Americas, the moon goes into Cancer, and that is a time. That's a time for Aries to slow down and not feel that you have to be at the center of things. And don't get nervous today, because some of you might feel that you really want to get things moving, and if you find yourself blocked, you might want to attribute blame. You might feel you have to do something to make an impression, but it's going to be hard work. So I think it's important to take it easy, and also consider the people, the other people in your life, whoever they are, because you have to get on with them. And just something you say or do which might be spur of a moment, it might be just a casual comment, might go down the wrong way. So I'd love to be more positive, Aries, but I think it is a day when you need to bring everything in and not be disappointed if things don't work quite as fast as you'd like them to. Taurus, you continue to have really marked social skills, at least social skills that are appropriate for the times in which we are living. You have the ability to get on with people, to understand people, to be sympathetic. The North Node continues to be conjunct Venus. I mean, it's not exactly conjunct Venus, but it's within a degree. And so that Venus conjunct the North Node allows you to be yourself, to understand what you need to be doing right now. And you also get a sense of your own obligations, because one aspect we have today, it's a heliocentric aspect, but I think it's an aspect of note, and that is that Venus heliocentrically is opposition Chiron. Now, geocentrically, of course, Venus is not opposition Chiron, but with Venus opposition Chiron, you might feel, Taurus, an obligation that there is something that you need to do. And it may be that you have to do something or say something that might be unpopular. Or you might have to go out of your way to help someone out. I mean, you may also have to go out of your way to be an individual, to be different, because something needs to be said. And it's not something you want to do, but there is this obligation, and you're not going to be able to be completely relaxed if you're missing this call of duty, really. And so the world matters, other people matter, and it's okay to be compassionate. You don't want to be too compassionate. You don't have to be compassionate for the sake of it. And some people are deserving of your time and energy, others are not. And it's certainly not a time to be spending money, for example, on other people's account, because or more likely on your account. But the moon is, the moon in Gemini, in very late Gemini, making squares to Saturn, Venus, Mercury. Those aspects could have a financial dimension, and it might be that you find yourself spending money because of other people's prompting, or from a social viewpoint, you might be inclined to spend money in order to socialize, but being with people should be cost-free. If you're having to spend money to be sociable, buying meals, going out to venues, whatever it might be, then you're probably doing something wrong. So that would be that would be unnecessary. And where there's a person, where there's a group, there is an obligation, as I've already said. So you can relax, you can kind of enjoy yourself, but you've always got to be aware that things can change, and you can suddenly see that obligation. And obligation can exist, wherever there's a conversation, and wherever there is contact with another person, wherever there is knowledge about other people, and you see someone in the street, and that perhaps gives you that feeling of obligation, and that obligation may stem from compassion. So that might not sound great, but you are doing the right thing. And that's the key point about Venus conjunct the North Node. You will always have the opportunity to do the right thing. And Taurus, you always will know what the right thing to do is. It will be obvious to you. Now, you could always decide that you don't want to be bothered, but you're not going to feel good about it. Yeah, it's not enough just to enjoy yourself. That's not what today is about. It's about really considering what is necessary. And don't forget, Venus is starting to make a conjunction to Saturn. Venus is less than 2 degrees away from this conjunction to Saturn, and I think that Venus conjunct Saturn will increase the sense of obligation. And while from a social view things are working well for you at the moment, it's not always going to stay that way. And as Venus moves to the conjunction of Saturn, you realize, or you will start to realize, that socializing has consequences and it can change you, but I don't think that's something you necessarily need to worry about today. Gemini. Mercury is very close to the North Node at the moment, and I was just been talking to Taurus, telling Taurus that Venus is close to the North Node, but Mercury is there as well. And this Mercury North Node conjunction is, I think, for you quite helpful, because it gives you an idea of your direction. I mean, that's one way of looking at the North Node. The North Node is the future. The South Node is the past. So if Mercury is on a North Node, you're looking at the future. You also know that the past is a lot more comfortable from the future. It would be nice to do what you were doing not so long ago, but things have changed, and it's time to up the pace. Mercury North Node in Pisces. There are issues with Mercury in Pisces because it's fallen in Pisces. It's exalted in Virgo, but there are certainly advantages of Mercury being in Pisces. It does allow you to think about all the things that you would like to be doing that you're not doing. And with Mercury conjunct North Node, if you believe that there is something you should be doing, then you're probably right. And if you start taking those first steps, starting to do what's expected of you, then soon enough you will be rewarded, and things will start to work your way. And perhaps that's a good way of judging whether you're doing the right thing. If you're doing something that is right, then the universe should clear a path for you. If you immediately find obstacles, if you feel bad about it, then that is a sign that maybe you're getting something wrong. Now, the moon does make a square to Saturn as well, and we can also think with moon square Saturn what you are supposed to be doing. And Saturn is in Pisces, moon is in Gemini. This moon square Saturn, I don't necessarily regard this as a bad thing. I think for some of the 12 signs, moon square Saturn is problematic, but I don't think it is for you. I think it's an opportunity to structure yourself and to decide what is important. And you can be tough, both with yourself and others with moon square Saturn. And once you decide what's important, then you're able to do what's necessary. The moon is not just square Saturn, it's square Venus, it's square the North Node, it's square Mercury, and the moon is in Gemini. So it is a dynamic aspect, an ever so slightly painful aspect, but it gives you a great sense of what needs to be done, and you can have a powerful impact. People will listen to you, and if you struggle a bit, then you'll get the results. So Gemini, it's not necessarily an easy day, but it's a very constructive day, and that's especially the case if you do what's expected of you by the universe. Mercury conjunct the North Node, and that's one aspect of what the Mercury conjunct the North Node is. Mercury conjunct the North Node, additionally, can be very communicative, and you can say what's on your mind, but you don't just use any language. You use carefully chosen words, carefully chosen not through logic, but through your sensitivity. You are quite sensitive at the moment, and I know that Gemini has a reputation for being somewhat insensitive. Emotions not being necessarily being the strongest suit, but emotionally you're quite fine-tuned right now. So do use it, and you can use your sensitivity also to understand what you're meant to be doing. And if you do what you're meant to be doing, can anything stop you? I don't think so. Cancer. Cancer, it's a bit of a changeover day. Moon is moving through late Gemini, preparing to move into your sign. And there is a big difference between Moon in Gemini and Moon in Cancer. Will you experience Moon in Cancer today? Well, if you're in the Americas, you will, because this afternoon or this evening, if you're in the west coast of America, the moon will go into Cancer this afternoon. If you're in the east coast, it will go into Cancer early this evening. So you will get that, and the moon moving into Cancer is going to give you a certain feeling of comfort, that a lot of the aggravation and problems of a recent past, they're just calming down. And of course it's the end of the day as well, so maybe that's a time when you can put your feet up, get things in perspective, and also be able to just gently tune into your own power. But for most people outside the Americas, the moon is going to be in late Gemini all day, and moon in late Gemini for Cancerians might be somewhat irritating. And the problem is that the moon in late Gemini does make a number of square aspects. It squares Saturn, and it squares Venus, and it squares Mercury, and that could just be irritating, just annoying, and something you have to deal with, something you have to think about that you didn't really want to think about, but you have to do it anyway. And you might also have questions about your own beliefs, other people's beliefs. Perhaps you thought you'd sort everything out. You thought you had sorted everything out, but you hadn't. And additionally, some people might be slightly annoying with that moon square Saturn. In fact, it's not just moon square Saturn, it's moon square Venus. You can't get on with everybody. You can try, but you're not always going to be successful, and you're up against the fundamental nature of who someone is. And you might have tried to gloss over it in the past, but you're reminded about people's real nature, and you have to accept that reality. That's one approach. Or you could just walk away. But moon square Saturn, it's not moon opposition Saturn. And if you do come across people you don't get on with, or maybe there are people who are around all the time, but incompatibilities are coming to the surface, you can probably work out the best way through. And it is possibly the case that if you just ignore the issue and you don't engage with the issue, then when the moon moves into Cancer, you'll find a better way of resolving it. So it might be best that if you really recognize that you and someone else don't get on, then you do stay out of their way, at least for today. Or if you're in the Americas, this evening, late this afternoon, when the moon moves into Cancer, when the moon moves into your sign, things will become a little easier. And additionally, Cancer, Mercury is conjunct the North Node, and that does mean that there are no absolute answers to anything at the moment. You can't make up your mind in a way that is definite and concrete. There are still things that have to be worked through, and there are still questions to be asked. And if you can spend some time trying to find those answers today with Mercury conjunct the North Node, I think that you will very much be doing the right thing, and those answers might not be close at hand. You might have to look further afield. You might have to look around the world. You have contact with the world. You have the internet. You're listening to me. I'm not saying I've got any answers, by the way, but some people might have the answers, and the answers may come from far away, and the answers may come from a source that is unexpected and at first just doesn't seem to be on your wavelength, may seem culturally removed from who you are, where you are. But if something is a little bit alien and feels disconcerting, that might be a sign that it actually represents some of the answers you're looking for. So if there is something you're trying to resolve, then keep going. And if you're feeling dissatisfied, even a little bit ignorant, you're not ignorant, of course, but if you feel a bit ignorant, that's probably a good place to be, because it encourages you to push things further, to keep looking until you really find the answers you're looking for, because those answers are available. Leo, the sun is your ruler, and it's on a fixed star called Alpharaz. Now, this fixed star is not something I am automatically familiar with. I've sort of vaguely heard of this fixed star. It is, I think it's the brightest star in the constellation of Andromeda, and I think it's sometimes called the head of Andromeda. And so the sun being on this fixed star may have some impact on you. So this star is Alpharaz. Sorry, I got it wrong. And it's Alpha Andromeda. And it is a double star. This is, by the way, Vivian Robson, the fixed stars and constellations in astrology. Now, I haven't mentioned this Alpharaz to anyone else. I didn't mention it in the introduction. So, this is just for you, Leo, if you're curious about these things. Alpharaz is a double star, white and purplish, in the hair of Andromeda, from Al-Sorat Al-Faraz, the horse's navel, as it was formerly located in Pegasus, frequently called Caput Andromedae, or Andromeda's head. So it gives independence, freedom, love, riches, honor, and a keen intellect. And Robson says about the sun conjunct Alpharaz, he says, honor, preferment, and favors from others. So I just told you that to cheer you up, because this fixed star Alpharaz is good news. It allows you to project yourself and to get support from other people. And if you've recently been feeling that you haven't been recognized, then maybe you can be recognized. So, don't hide yourself. You might be tempted to. You might feel there's no point, but if you really try to get appreciation, then I think it is available for you if this fixed star really does work. Now, aside from that, Moon is moving through late Gemini, and the Moon is making squares to Mercury, Venus, and Saturn. And so, with these squares, well, it kind of contradicts Alpharaz, because these squares indicate that other people in certain cases could be a problem. You try your hardest to be sociable, to be available, but something is holding you back. Now the question is, what is holding you back? Is it other people? Is it just the nature of the people you're dealing with? Or is it you? Could it just be your own reservations? because we do have a lot of planets in Pisces, and Pisces might represent your psychology, your unconscious, your past, and the experiences of the past, and they're just perhaps preventing you from fully expressing yourself. So maybe you're imagining it. And if we go back to the Sun conjunct Alpha, that would surely indicate that you can get the appreciation you deserve. And if you feel that the appreciation isn't available, that it's just other people causing problems, maybe you're wrong. And perhaps what you should be doing is you should be giving other people a chance, and not feeling that everything is a real struggle, though it is absolutely possible that you do regard things as a struggle. That seems to be the state of mind you're in, that nothing is easy, that if you want something to happen, you're going to have to put in enormous amounts of effort. And it's true, Leo, that if you really want to get noticed and you feel that other people are being not sympathetic, you can do things. You can be dramatic, and you can upset things. You can break them down if you really feel that that's what you want to do. And when you break something down, well, obviously everyone's got to respond. So in your own way, you can push at something so hard it doesn't bend, it just breaks. If that's what you want to do you have to do that? I don't think you necessarily do. And I think you should give the world a chance, and try not to get too worried about things. Try not to think that the past is going to repeat itself. It's quite possible it doesn't repeat itself. And it just may be that this fixed star Alpha kind of comes to the rescue. And additionally, you shouldn't forget that the Sun is in Aries. The Sun is right in the middle of Aries, and the Sun is exalted in Aries, and that says so much about you. Not just that, the Sun is making a sextile to Jupiter. Okay, that Sun-Jupiter sextile is not exact, but it suggests to me that if you are positive and you really think the best of other people, and if you find that in one place you're not getting enough appreciation, well, just go somewhere else. Keep trying and keep believing in yourself. And through that approach, you can cut through the negativity and turn what could be a somewhat difficult day into a day where you can triumph. It really is possible, but you've got to make it happen. It's not a day where you can just follow the line of least resistance. That's not the right approach. Virgo, Mercury is now conjunct the North Node, and this conjunction between Mercury and the North Node takes place in Pisces, in your opposite sign. And with Mercury conjunct the North Node, you feel that, or you should feel that you don't have to do everything on your own. You can enlist other people's help, and it's okay, additionally, to listen to other people. Even let other people take the lead. You may not be fully trusting, but you can't do everything on your own. You can't make all the decisions yourself. And if you give other people a chance, then you should be able to benefit. It's not always going to be easy. You may be of the opinion that if you are too considerate, you might lose out. And you're thinking also about your own ambitions. And if you're an ambitious Virgo, which at the moment you probably are with the Moon and Jupiter in Gemini, if you're ambitious, you may be of a view that ambition is a solo enterprise, or at least an enterprise that requires you to be taking the lead, making the decisions. But you might be mistaken. Other people have a role to play. If you forget about other people and you think you can do everything on your own, then Virgo, things might not work out. You might run into difficulties. And so, start the day looking at the social environment, just considering it all. Consider which people have to be taken into account, and just listening to what they have to say. I mean, that can be very useful. And don't be too afraid. At the moment, some Virgos might have worries. If you just let things happen in their own way, well, all sorts of things might occur. If you trust people, who knows? Bad things can happen. And so you have to ask yourself, any fears, worries you have, are they real? I mean, when we're talking about these worries, you can actually see them in the chart. Because if you look at Mercury, Mercury is 3 degrees off Neptune, and it's also 3 degrees off Saturn. So Mercury, your ruler, is conjunct the Saturn-Neptune midpoint. And so Saturn-Neptune can be about fears, and fears holding you back. And so you have to cut through those fears. And one way of resolving any fears you have might be to trust other people, or even confide in them. So if there's something bothering you, then don't necessarily keep it to yourself. Tell someone about it. And your concerns might be completely legitimate. And when you tell someone about what's bothering you, they might understand the issue, and they might come up with solutions, or you might come up with solutions together. And therefore, that is the way forward. You really can't keep things to yourself. And if you do trust people, you don't have to completely trust people. You have to keep an eye open. People can let you down, but if you trust people enough, then I do think that in the end they will come up with the goods. Libra, the moon continues moving through late Gemini, and it may feel a bit like an overexposed photograph. Something has, had its moment, and it was working well, but it's perhaps not working quite as well as it used to be. And it could be because you've left it for too long. Of course, overexposed photographs, you don't really have overexposed photographs because everything is digital. I'm thinking about, when I say overexposed, I was kind of thinking about the darkroom. When I was at school, I remember playing with photography, and you leave something in a developer. How does it work? In a developer fluid, and you start with a piece of white photographic paper, and it just gets darker, and you see the picture, and the idea is to take it out of a developer fluid before, and put it into a fixer. That's what you call it, isn't that right? Anyway, to take it out from one fluid into another fluid, from one solution to another solution before it gets overexposed. But if you leave it too long, it will just become black. And so you want to kind of quit while you're ahead. And if you stay somewhere for too long, it's just going to become tiresome, and what seemed like a great time will become not just tedious, but may actually become quite damaging. So Libra, it's important that you know when to leave, that you know when you're having too much of a good thing. And that is sort of a reminder that nothing lasts forever. And the moon now is making a square to Saturn, and Venus is also making a square to Saturn, and it's possible that you now get it. You understand what you need to understand, and you can now leave. You can prepare yourself for something else. And so that is the right approach. And to contemplate change and to contemplate the future, Libra, would be a good thing. And additionally, some people have really had their day, and you're starting to realize that maybe they haven't got so much to offer. They did have a lot to offer, or appear to have a lot to offer in the past, but now, not quite so much. And, you have to decide what's important, and you have to decide what your priorities are. And so, Libra, just do what you feel is necessary. Make the change. You know what that change is. And, once you've made that change, once you've left a situation that has becoming stagnant, then you're going to feel better, and you're going to have a greater sense of freedom, and you'll be able to see what's about to come up on the horizon. You can start to see something on the horizon. It's quite a long way away, but you can see the future. You can see things changing, and you can see that it is changing in a way that is going to be favourable. I mean, another reason, by the way, why you might want to make a few changes, get away from things that are becoming stagnant, is just health. There may be something you're doing, or some situation you've been in, that could be undermining you, making you not feel quite as mentally healthy and even physically healthy as you should be. And if you ask yourself seriously, could you be in better shape? And yes, the answer is yeah, it probably is yes, that some small change could be of benefit to you. And so you need to kind of recognize what the problem is, and it just might be certain other people can make you feel under the weather. It's just something about their attitude and the way they present themselves. So Libra, that's what you should be doing. You should be looking after yourself and moving on. Scorpio, you are feeling that life is a little bit heavy, and that might have something to do with the fact that the moon is making a square to Saturn. Moon square Saturn is often, not a particularly easy aspect, and you feel that things are just more difficult than they should be. I mean, that they should be easy, but they're not. And part of it may be the help and the cooperation you're getting. You're not getting enough support, or else you might have been focusing on something for too long. If you look at something for long enough, you start to lose focus, and at the same time you become a little obsessed about it. So being obsessed about something what you can't really focus on is not a good position to be in, and you need to somehow be able to change your focus. And it may be about having two pairs of glasses. You have having a pair of glasses for reading, or having a pair of glasses for longer vision, and you haven't got varifocals. Is that what? I don't know if they call them varifocals in America. I think in the US, in the UK, they call them varifocals, but it needs a different view, and you've just got too close to something. You can't see it, and a change is required. And that change is definitely possible because, the moon is in Gemini. At least the moon is in Gemini for most of the day. And the moon in Gemini is a double sign. There's always an alternative available with moon in Gemini. So what is that alternative? And it might be, Scorpio, that you've just been concentrating on one task for too long, and there's another task that you could do. It might not be so important, might not be so pressing, but it might be a good idea to focus on it for a little. It might not be a task. Task sounds rather tedious. It could be something you enjoy. So if you're doing something that you feel it's a sense of obligation, you have to do it, then just take a break. Do something that is meaningful, that gives you a sense of purpose. And and straight away you're going to feel a whole lot better. And at the end of the day, the moon moves into Cancer. Now, the moon might move into Cancer this afternoon, this evening, late this afternoon, early this evening, if you're in the Americas. Might move into Cancer just before midnight if you're in the UK. Could be tomorrow if you're elsewhere. But, when the moon moves into Cancer, that's going to feel good. The moon moving into a water sign is just going to make you feel better about yourself, and you're going to feel more at one with things. So if things are getting rather intense at the moment for you, Scorpio, and you're feeling a little bit stuck, don't worry. The moon is about to leave Gemini, and when it does leave Gemini, when it moves into your fellow water sign of Cancer, I do think that you're going to feel a lot better. And additionally, Scorpio, don't allow yourself to feel too tense. Some Scorpios might feel tense. You're not alone in this. If you've been listening to these 12 signs, I've not been entirely positive. And so I'm not singling anyone out for negativity. I'm just trying to explain things as I see it. So, when I talk about your horoscope for tomorrow, I'll be talking about what it means for the moon to be in Cancer, and why I think that is going to work in your favor. And don't forget also, Scorpio, that Venus is moving towards a trine of Mars, and it's getting closer and closer. And that Venus trine Mars indicates to me that however you feel, the impression you're having on other people is becoming increasingly effective. People are noticing you, and you are becoming quite charismatic. Okay, you might not get the results today, but as that trine gets closer and closer, I do think that it's going to be a real plus for you as far as other people are concerned, your social life, relationships. But I'll be talking about that maybe in tomorrow's video or the video after that. But I'll be talking about that very soon. Sagittarius, we have a square between the moon and Saturn. Everyone's affected by the square between the moon and Saturn. We also have a square between the moon and Mercury and the moon and Venus. And it just could be that some things are annoying and that not everything goes your way. Or alternatively, there might just be disturbances. Things disturbing your peace of mind. And you'd like things to be perfect, and they're not perfect, and not everyone is to your liking, and what people say and do could irritate you. This is very possible. Additionally, Sagittarius, it might be a time when you find that it's not so easy to get your point across. You try, but people don't seem to understand. They don't seem to get what you're trying to say. And I think this was a bit of a problem yesterday, but maybe today it's actually stronger, partly because we got Moon square Saturn. And some other people they don't want to listen. And they'd prefer to just stay where they are. And, what can you do? I don't think there's much you can do. And you have to accept people as they are. Not try to fight them or change them. Just accept them. You could try to understand them. That might be a good approach, because your ability to understand right now is very good. And it can often be difficult to understand if you don't have a sympathy with someone. But in your case, you have that capacity to know what's going on. And so you do try to listen to people. You don't have to listen just to their words. It's the way they express themselves. It's their body language. It's what they're not saying as well as what they are saying. And so, that can give you a good idea of what actually is happening. And if you give people a chance, then you won't always be disappointed. And one aspect we have today is Mercury making a conjunction to the North Node. And Mercury conjunct the North Node indicates that it can be worthwhile giving someone a chance. And you have to be very protective of someone, or protective of something that you don't necessarily want to protect. But if you really make an effort, Sagittarius, you can be nurturing. Even if you don't feel like being nurturing, but you can be. And this is especially the case late in the day if you're in the Americas, because the moon moves out of Gemini into Cancer. If you're in the UK, then right at the end, I think it's with 10 minutes left of the day, 10 minutes to midnight UK time, the moon moves into Cancer. And so you can, in certain cases, be nurturing. And as you move into tomorrow, as the moon moves into Cancer, this nurturing ability is going to develop further. And that is a situation where you're having to look after someone or pay attention to someone who you don't necessarily have any sympathy with, but it might be the right thing to do with Mercury conjunct the North Node. And one point about your work, if you are working, or your business with this Mercury conjunct the North Node, Mercury conjunct the North Node actually might be quite helpful. And it allows you to do something very useful relating to your ambitions, but in a way that is very private. You don't have to do it in public. You don't have to tell people what you're doing. But if you're working in your own way, in your own space, preferably at home, working on something that is important to you, it might not be anything to do with career or business. It might be something else you're involved with. But if you do things on your own terms, then I think that you can get good results, and you'll also just know that what you're doing is right, and that you're making the right decisions, and that you are actually progressing towards some important conclusions. Capricorn, there is a lot of tension flying around, and that's something that's general. It's not just about you. It's about everyone. And that may be what Thursday is like. And yeah, you're picking up on it, and it could be quite difficult for you to relax, and you're trying your best to create some order. You'll be very good at creating order today, and it just may be the case that you just have to go with that tension, not take that tension too seriously, not personalize it. I mean, that matters, because if you personalize things, it just becomes so much more difficult. But if you actually talk to other people, you'd recognize that they're as tense as you are. They've got the same problems as you are, the same worries, the same vague suspicions. So you don't really want to take things personally. And what you can do, Capricorn, is just quietly get on with whatever you want to get on with. And you might actually be helped by a square between the Moon and Saturn. I mean, the Moon and Saturn is a problem for many people. It might make them feel a little bit down, but Saturn is your ruler, and with that Moon square Saturn, you have a chance to do what is necessary, and you can keep your emotions in check, and you can do quite a lot of multitasking. You'll be very good at multitasking with this Moon square Saturn. It might not be easy, but you can certainly do it. And you may or may not get support and cooperation from other people. The Moon is making a square to Mercury, square to Venus, so not everyone is going to understand what you're doing. But is that necessary? You're not a completely social animal. I mean, all of us are to an extent a social animal, but you don't have to endlessly worry about, what other people are thinking, and you can just get on with it. And the Moon, by the way, it does change sign in the end. It moves from Gemini to Cancer, and so it moves into your opposite sign, and that will take place late this afternoon or this evening if you're in the Americas. Will happen more sort of tomorrow if you're in Europe, Africa, or Asia. But if you are in the Americas, then at the end of the day, as the Moon moves into Cancer, I do think that you're going to feel better. And in general, you're going to be a nicer and more sympathetic person. I mean, you're always a nice and a sympathetic person, but with the Moon in Cancer, you'll find it just easier to relate. I mean, if you want to, you don't have to relate. But also, Moon in Cancer, you might notice a change in other people. Other people may become easier to deal with, less crazy, and more sympathetic to your needs. So yeah, Moon in Cancer is moving into Cancer. It's a good thing, but for many of us, it doesn't really happen till tomorrow, and I'll be talking about that in my horoscope for tomorrow, which is Friday. Aquarius, you may feel that the party is coming to an end, that something you've been quite excited about, you've been engaged with for a fair amount of time, it's reaching a conclusion, and it could be a time for wrapping things up or moving on. Because if you do try to continue with things, then your sense of satisfaction is going to go down, and there'll be a reduction of marginal utility. So it's just worthwhile thinking about what the next phase actually is, and being ready to move on. And part of the problem is that the Moon is making squares to Venus, Saturn, Mercury. These squares are dynamic, and it might be about you trying your very hardest to keep something going, but it is an effort, and it becomes more and more of an effort. And so, Aquarius, you might then ask, what is the point? it's probably worthwhile thinking about moving on and stopping things before they go too far, or rather before they just become a drag on your time and your energy. So Aquarius, it could be a day when you have to be quite tough on yourself. You may also have to be quite tough on other people. Some other people. People vary. And we shouldn't forget that the Sun is conjunct the fixed star Alpheratz, but I'll be talking about that in a moment. And so, what is the next stage? Well, as the day progresses, certainly as Thursday becomes Friday, it is a time to refocus and to put things together and to finish off anything that has been left behind. So there may be a few tasks that you were, or a few projects that you were involved with over the last month, and you forgot about them, and now you feel it's time to get things back on the road. You feel a bit guilty about it, but of course, the longer you leave it, the more difficult it is to start again. So now might be a time to restart. I mean, it could be anything. Maybe you've been teaching yourself a language and time has passed, and you kind of know that if you don't get back to it now, then you will have missed your moment. And it may not be a language, it may be just something else that you're trying to learn about that's becoming a bit difficult. The easy first chapter is out of the way, and now it's getting complicated, and now might be an opportunity to have another look at it. So Aquarius, do be ready to make a transition, and the sooner you can make that transition, the better. Now, Sun conjunct the fixed star Alpheratz. So I did talk about this. I did talk about Sun conjunct Alpheratz when I was talking to Leo, and Alpheratz is quite a fortunate fixed star, and it's a fixed star that can be connected with honor and preferment. And with the Sun conjunct Alpheratz, there are two ways in which that could work. Sun in Aries conjunct Alpheratz may give you the opportunity to express yourself in a way that just gets people's respect. People will listen to you, and they'll know that you're the one with the answers. You just speak with a natural authority. And this could be about any subject, but don't ignore the financial dimension. That might be something to do with it. So if you talk about money, then it seems quite clear that you do in fact know what you're talking about. Mercury is in Pisces, conjunct the North Node, and you understand what matters financially. An alternative interpretation of Sun conjunct Alpheratz would be that it's not about you, it is about someone else. Someone else is honourable, and someone else is going places, and at the same time they're prepared to offer you something, and they're prepared to make your life better. So some people around you are honourable. They will honour their promises, and it's even possible that their success could be your success. So, while it's important to be careful with other people, you can't be friends with everyone. Some people are really worth clinging on to, and perhaps you need to recognize who they are. So, who is the person around you who is most strongly placed? You may even be a little bit jealous of them, but we're all jealous, by the way. Jealousy is part of human nature, So if you are jealous of someone, then rather than resent them, you should be happy that they are going somewhere, that they are successful, because in some ways you can benefit from them. Another thing to point out about today is that Saturn is now very, very close to making a sextile with Uranus. It's almost there. And that Saturn sextile Uranus, it could create events, happenings, and it could stir things up. Now you think sextile, it might be something that is fortunate. You needed a change. You needed something dramatic to happen just to help move you on. But it could also be the case that you're careless, or you haven't properly considered all alternatives, all possibilities, and as a result, something happens that you just hadn't thought about. It hadn't occurred to you. It could have occurred to you if you'd given it some thought, but it didn't. And that might sort of knock you off balance. So with Saturn sextile Uranus, be a little careful and be ready for the unexpected. Because, when the unexpected happens, you need to be able to respond very quickly. Pisces. Pisces, you start the day probably not wanting to do very much. You'd prefer to just be comfortable in your own surroundings, and that's certainly nothing to be guilty about, but you can't stay in one place forever, and you do need to be ready for the next move, even if all the evidence is suggesting that nothing is going on. And worse, there may be evidence that there isn't much support around, that no one knows what they're doing. Even if you know what's going on, everyone, not everyone, but a lot of people may be fairly useless. And if you try to talk to people, discuss things with them, you may not get many answers. People may be deluded, they may be stuck in their own world, and that's kind of a reflection of you. So what you see in other people is actually a projection. And so there just could be a general sense of stuckness. And it is not helped by the fact that the moon is square Saturn. So Saturn is moving through Pisces, the moon is square Saturn, and that really does just incline you not to do anything and just to think that, but things can't get any better. Fortunately, the moon is on the brink of changing sign, and if you're in the Americas, then the moon will change sign late this afternoon or early this evening, and the moon will go into Cancer. And when the moon goes into Cancer, that, I think, is going to make things a whole lot better. You're going to have more space, you're going to be able to be more positive, and you'll find that a lot of the negativity that was bugging you will disappear. Now, if you're in Europe, Asia, Africa, then Australasia, then the moon will not really change sign until tomorrow. Though if you're in the UK, it changes sign at 10 minutes to midnight. So if you're in Britain and you're a night owl, then you might see a change as you move into the early hours of tomorrow. So things will feel better. In the darkness, there will be a sudden increase in your positivity. So things are moving. You don't worry, even if things don't appear to be moving, because things don't appear to be moving actually, but under the surface they are moving, and you are getting ready for a transition. And so don't draw conclusions today. And just because everything seems a bit difficult and stuck, that is not a reflection of the whole week. It's just about Thursday, and Friday is a different day. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now I want to look at things from the viewpoint of the I Ching, as usual. So I asked the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 9, the taming power of the small. So if you have been listening to my forecasts for the 12 signs, you will have noticed that in many cases I was quite negative, and I was talking about this square aspect between the moon and Saturn, moon in Gemini, square Saturn in Pisces, and I was talking about some of the difficulties that might bring. It might be sort of difficult to sometimes express ourselves, and also other people may not have been especially receptive to our message. And in a way, this is reflected by this hexagram, the taming power of the small. So there are things that we want to do, lots of things we want to do. And the question is, are we wasting our time? And many of the things that we want to do are actually of not much consequence. We almost want to, some of us just want to be busy for the sake of it. We just want to create action, and it's a kind of action that is going nowhere, and it's not going to help. We sometimes have an urge to do something, maybe fundamentally because we're bored. Moon is in Gemini. Moon in Gemini can get bored, even if we're not a Gemini. When the moon is in Gemini, we can well, let's do something, and we do something, and it's just a big mess. It becomes a big mess, and it's like tearing up a piece of paper endlessly. It's taming power of the small. It's almost like taming power of the small. You think of some rodent tearing up a piece of paper out of frustration, boredom, looking for entertainment, but it's not really going anywhere. And so we have to be aware of that tendency at the moment, and the taming power of the small. So you could say that we are the small and we need to be tamed. And the first line moves, and that's good. The first line moves because the bottom line represents the beginning of the journey, the beginning of the process. And because there's movement there, we realize at an early stage we're doing something wrong, or we're not doing it in the right way. So we're on the road, we're going in a particular direction, and probably the way to see this moving line is we just go back the way we came. We just turn around, we realize we simply haven't got the strength, and the timing is wrong, and we just go back, start again, and we don't even have to start anything again at all, because we show some self-discipline, and we don't have to use force. We don't even have to embarrass ourselves, because it's at such an early stage that no one's really noticed. So if we can just stop what we're doing, remind ourselves that we're wasting our time, or at least notice that we're wasting our time, and just say, well, let's just call a halt to the thing. And this hexagram does move because we've got a moving line, and it moves to hexagram 57, which is the gentle. And this is perhaps indicating, what we should be doing once we've returned to the starting point and we've come back the way we came. Then we can start to understand the nature of things. The gentle. It's often about the wind. I like to imagine the gentle as a wind blowing through a big house, just getting through everything, and understanding where we're going wrong, understanding some of the rot, because rot and stagnation is actually part of the experience of today. And I think we got that a little bit from the astrology. And so there is something stagnant around, something we've been doing for too long. It's not working any longer. We're not fully aware of it, but the wind, it blows through the house, it blows through our soul, it blows through our mind, and it uncovers things that are not working and that are stagnant, and we can remove them. And it's certainly not a time with the gentle to be really being desperate to stand out for taking big initiatives. In fact, with the gentle, there is some advantage in just following the established way of doing things, at least in the short term. And we don't have to be the leaders. Yeah, sometimes it's okay to just accept that someone else knows things better than we do. Again, it's not a permanent state of affairs, but it's just with the gentle, it's a time for just understanding and recognition and just clearing things out. And once we've cleared things out, once we've removed the evil, I Ching likes to talk about evil, once we've cleared all out, we're just going to feel a whole lot better. And now I want to talk about Mars. And so from a sidereal point of view, Mars is moving into Cancer. Now, I know that using the tropical zodiac, just Mars is definitely in Cancer. I mean, if you look at the chart for today, if we look at Thursday, you can see that very much Mars is at 24 Cancer. So there's a long time before Mars moves into Leo. But if we use the sidereal zodiac, and if I'm using the Alari Ayanamsha, the Ayanamsha is the difference between the tropical zodiac and the sidereal zodiac. The Ayanamsha is about 24 degrees. So if we knock off 24 degrees from everything, we see that Mars actually goes back from 24 Cancer to about 0 Cancer. And so the actual time in which Mars moves into sidereal Cancer, here it is. I think it actually happened yesterday. Well, I'm recording this on today. I'm recording this on a Wednesday, but so Wednesday, April the 2nd. You can see that Mars is at 0 degrees Cancer sidereally, and I often feel that sometimes the most important degree areas in terms of tropical astrology are around 23 of the sign. So, going back to the position of Mars tropically, we've just passed 23 Cancer, and sometimes when Mars, other planets hit about 23, it seems that things happen. And it may just be that what this is about the planet moving into the sidereal sign. When a planet is in Cancer tropically, but it is also in Cancer, well, in this case Mars is in Cancer, in the same sign tropically as sidereally. So going back to the position of Mars here. So, what does it mean? Why does it matter that Mars has moved into Cancer? Well, Mars is fallen in Cancer, and in Vedic astrology, it's important when a planet is fallen. A planet loses strength when it's in Cancer. So, from a Vedic perspective, Mars has arguably lost strength. If that's what's happened, Mars is more likely to be a problematic influence when it's in Cancer. And that may say something about the world in general and what's happening around us when we look at all the difficulties that we have to, we have to experience, the world has to experience. We've got war, we've got tariffs, we've got economic concerns, and here now Mars moving into Cancer. It just doesn't make anything much better, does it? And Mars is not like Saturn. So I just talked about Saturn moving into Pisces. Now that is a serious event because Saturn stays in a sign for a couple of years. Now Mars does not stay in a sign for a couple of years. Mars will move out of sidereal Cancer and move into sidereal Gemini around the 6th of June, and so that might be something to look forward to. But for the next couple of months, we do have Mars in Cancer, and I think that could be a problem. And then there's the question of how does it affect us? Well, if you wanted to look at Mars moving into Cancer and how it affects you, well, what you could do is you could just change your ascendant to a sidereal ascendant. So you took a look at your tropical ascendant, you knock off 23, 24 degrees, and you have a different ascendant. So that's one way of doing it. So, for example, if you look at my chart, here's my chart, and my tropical ascendant is 4 degrees Aries. So if I knock off 24 degrees, that means that my ascendant goes back into Aries. So in my Vedic chart, I've got Aries rising. So for me, when Mars changes sign, Mars will go into my 4th house. So in Vedic astrology, 4th house is about the home. It's about usual 4th house stuff. It can be about fixed investments, where one is living. And so that might be where the problems lie for me when Mars moves into Cancer. So that's me. And I just wanted to look at a few famous people. And now one thing about Vedic astrology, I don't know if you're interested, and I'm probably talking about something that you don't want to hear about. But one thing about Vedic astrology is that as planets move through different signs, they have different strengths. And you calculate this using something called the Ashtaka Varga system. And you can calculate it by hand, but it takes a long time. And I think there are maybe online calculators. And what it is that you calculate the Ashtaka Varga for each planet. And for each planet, and you can use it for transits. And so as each planet transits for your chart, it has different strengths. So, for example, in my chart, my Cancer, when Mars is moving through Cancer, Cancer from a Mars perspective has a strength of, for me, I think it has a strength of 5, and the options anywhere between 0 and 8. So for me, Mars moving through Cancer, because of Ashtaka Varga, Cancer is not a bad house, not a bad sign for Mars to be transiting through. So maybe Mars going through Cancer is not going to be so bad, because my sort of Ashtaka Varga score for Cancer, again, from a Mars perspective, each planet has a different score for each of the 12 signs. So that sounds a bit complicated, but you can work this out by hand, and there are online calculators, as I've just said. I believe there are. I haven't actually tried these online calculators out for myself. So let's consider a few people and how they might experience Mars moving through Cancer. And we'll start with King Charles III. So King Charles III, he has Leo rising in his Vedic chart, in his Western chart. I think his rising is about 5 degrees Leo. So that means that in his Vedic horoscope, he's got Cancer rising. So with with Mars moving into Cancer, Mars is just moving into his first house. Of course, the first house is an important house, and that may say something about his health. And we know that he's having his treatment for cancer. And by the way, cancer, the disease, and cancer, the sign, have absolutely nothing to do with each other. If you, I think in terms of phobias, if you're afraid of cancer, the disease, I think you have carcinophobia. If you have cancer phobia, that means you're afraid of crabs. It doesn't mean you're afraid of cancer. So with Mars moving into his first house, yeah, that might be about his health. And additionally, in Vedic astrology, Mars makes aspects, and you have to have a particular way in which Vedic astrology works. Different planets aspect different houses, and Mars makes aspects to its first, fourth, seventh, and eighth houses. So that's the way it works in the system of Vedic astrology that I'm vaguely familiar with. So Prince Charles will have his Mars in his first. It will also hit his fourth, and it will hit his seventh house, and it will hit his eighth house. So, that underlines the fact that, over the next couple of months, with Mars moving through his first house, things could be difficult for him. And from an Ashtaka Varga perspective, Cancer, the sign Cancer for him has 3 points. It's not great, but it's pretty average. So I don't think there was anything especially bad about Cancer in terms of transits for Charles. So I'm not saying that anything dramatic is happening. By the way, with the Ashtaka Varga system, I'm not necessarily convinced that it works, but I thought I would just point it out to you. You might be interested. And another person who has got Cancer rising in her Vedic chart is the unmentionable woman. She, born on August the 4th, 1981, she has Cancer rising. So that means that Mars is moving into her first house. That could be a big deal. So remember, in Vedic astrology, transits happen not when they get exact, or they can happen as well, but the transit can happen when something is in the same sign. So the moment Mars moves into that woman's first house, Cancer, it immediately makes an aspect to her North Node, to her Mercury, and to her Sun, and also it makes an aspect to her 8th house and to her 4th house. Now, interestingly, if you do Ashtaka Varga for that woman, then you find that her score for Cancer, when Mars is in it, Mars actually is going through a sign, Cancer, which has 6 points. So that's actually quite good. It's close to the maximum. So although Mars is fallen, Mars moving through Cancer for this woman, it might actually make her more dynamic, and don't underestimate her. And she may be fighting hard for her rights and to get noticed. And if we look at that woman's husband, I think I did that woman's husband's chart. Yeah, here it is. Here's her husband. So her husband, so Mars is moving through his 8th house. So Mars going through the 8th is because he's got Sagittarius rising. And so, because he's got Capricorn rising in the west, so that means he's got Sagittarius rising in the east. So Mars moving through his 8th, the eighth can be a somewhat difficult house, but it's not an angular house, and as far as he's concerned, I wouldn't necessarily read too much into it. As far as the Ashtaka Varga score of his eighth house is concerned, I think it's a 3, so it's a bit lower than average, but nothing special there. I don't think. And then I think we should talk a little bit more about France, and I wanted to talk about Marine Le Pen. I also want to talk about Emmanuel Macron. And here is Emmanuel Macron's horoscope, his Vedic chart. And Emmanuel Macron has his Mars in sidereal Cancer. So Mars moving into Cancer is moving into the same sign as Macron's Mars. Mars is also moving into his 7th house. And so we get the idea of conflict. Incidentally, Marine Le Pen has got her Mars at 28, has got her Mars at 28 Cancer. And so Marine Le Pen's Mars is exactly on Emmanuel Macron's descendant. So, in fact, from an ascendant point of view, Macron has his Vedic ascendant in Capricorn. He also has his Western ascendant in Capricorn. So he's a kind of double Capricorn there with his ascendant. And so it's an angular house that Mars is moving into. It is about his enemies and him having to deal with his enemies. Now, as far as Ashtaka Varga is concerned, Mars moving through Cancer, Cancer only gets 1 point. I mean, it's possible to get 0 points, but this is a difficult time for Emmanuel Macron with Mars moving through his 7th house. And he may feel happy now that Marine Le Pen has been banned from standing for the presidency, but it could be that now a lot of his problems start to come to the surface because he's coming up to his Mars return. Mars is in his 7th, and from a Vedic view, of course, Mars gets an Ashtaka Varga score of 1, so it'd be interesting to see what happens to him between now and the beginning of June. And then I just want to quickly return to Marine Le Pen's chart. So Marine Le Pen is the only chart I'm going to look at when I've already got it set up in my Vedic program. I don't want to switch between my Vedic and tropical programs, but I just want to have another look at Marine Le Pen's chart. So here is Marine Le Pen's chart, which I looked at yesterday. And so Marine Le Pen has her Mars in Cancer. This is her sidereal Vedic Mars is in Cancer. So she's got her Mars in the same sign as Emmanuel Macron. And her Mars is actually very weak. It's one of the weakest planets in her chart using Shad Bala, which is a 6-fold strength. And so Mars is moving into her 11th house. And so this is a point where the aggravation really starts. Now, from an Ashtaka Varga point of view, while Mars moving through Cancer as a transit, it gets 5 points. It's actually above average. So Mars moving through the 11th may not be such a bad thing. And in Vedic astrology, the 11th is seen as being an upachaya house, which means a growth house, and malefics often work quite well in the 11th house, in upachaya houses. And so I don't know whether that really works by transit. It certainly works by natal position. So, but maybe Mars in the 11th may not be so bad for her. And yesterday I did talk about her being in her Rahu Mahadasha and her Ketu Subdasha. And I was suggesting that this was going to be a period for Marine Le Pen, where things were really going to be really up in the air for her, really difficult, but also a lot of struggle, because she's got the South Node in the first house in her Vedic chart. She's got the North Node in her seventh house, and so Rahu and Ketu as a pair, they are desperate for power, and they will do anything to get their way. That is the nature of these points. And her Ketu is in Virgo, and so she's in her Rahu Mahadasha and her Ketu Subdasha. But Ketu's in Virgo in the first house. Ketu is, I think the term is exalted in Virgo in Vedic astrology. So she's actually got quite a strong South Node. And remembering also that Mars is she's having her Mars return, and Mars doesn't do so badly in the 11th, especially when you take into account Ashtaka Varga. I do think that there is a possibility that Marine Le Pen, with this north and the south node coming together, is really going to make her go completely ballistic. And she may do things that she wouldn't normally think about doing, north node, south node. And so she can do things which, could be dramatic. I mean, she's a powerful woman. Even if she has been banned from a presidential election, she's supported by 37% of the French people. And it just may be that how she responds to this ban is not how the establishment was expecting, or she may escalate, or maybe the establishment were hoping she'd escalate and they were hoping it would backfire, but it may not backfire. So Marine Le Pen isn't going away, and that North Node Mahadasha, South Node Subdasha is very much in force, and her South Node is certainly working. One other point, I've talked about Ashtaka Varga, and I said that every planet has transiting houses which it transits where it's strong, and houses where it's weak. Now, I mentioned that she was banned by the court on Monday. 2 days earlier, Saturn had gone into her sidereal seventh house. Saturn had gone into Pisces, and in terms of Ashtaka Varga, her Ashtaka Varga score for Saturn in Pisces is 1. That is very low. It's not quite 0, but for Marine Le Pen, Saturn in Pisces is probably the worst sign for Saturn to be transiting. So it's kind of not surprising that the moment Saturn went into Pisces, she had this catastrophe of being banned from standing for public office. And finally, I want to look at the horoscope of Donald Trump. So here is Trump's chart. This is his Vedic chart. So he is a double Leo in a sense, because his ascendant is Leo in his Western astrology. It's also Leo in Vedic astrology using the Leri Ayanamsha. So Mars is just moving into sidereal Cancer. And what this means is that Mars is going to make a conjunction to his Saturn and his Venus. I'm not going to mention Pluto, because in Vedic astrology I don't think Pluto is anything we need to bother about. So in a general sense, Mars is moving into the same sign as his Venus and Saturn. Additionally, if you're into Western astrology, Mars is about to make a conjunction to his Saturn as well, and it's also about to make a conjunction to his Venus. So over the next few days, Mars on his Saturn, Mars on his Venus, that is something that we really need to be looking at. I mean, just look, is it the next few days? So we've got that running through, for the next, between now and the beginning of next week. So he's got this major Mars transit, and it could be quite a difficult aspect from a Western viewpoint. Though, if we just look at this house as a whole, so Cancer represents his 12th house in Vedic astrology. So you could say Mars in the 12th house represents maybe some of his enemies, secret enemies. That could be a way of looking at it. Now, as far as Ashtaka Varga is concerned, Cancer for Mars has a score of 3, I think it is. So it's not a huge amount. It's not a particularly unfortunate house for Mars to be transiting, but I just think it's more significant the fact that it's aspecting his Venus and his Saturn. Additionally, Mars in Vedic astrology aspects the 1st, the 7th, and the 8th and the 4th houses. So if we look at the 8th house from the 12th house, so we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That means actually Mars is aspecting his 7th house. So that's again with Mars moving into sidereal Cancer. His enemies are starting to come out of the woodwork, not just his secret enemies, but perhaps his public enemies as well. I know that might sound a little bit obvious, but I think that this does seem to be a little bit of a crisis point for his regime right now. I think I'll talk about it more in detail in a different video. But he's trying to sort things out with Ukraine and Russia, and he's got the tariffs, and he's just had elections. There have been local. He won some seats in Florida, but apparently the congressional seats that he won in Florida, that the Republicans won in Florida, it was by a reduced majority, and of course the Democrats have just taken that Supreme Court position in Wisconsin. So there's evidence that the population is not entirely comfortable with him, and plus the stock market doesn't look very happy, and of course that relates to tariffs. And when we think about Mars moving into Cancer, we're reminded that Mars is returning to a fairly similar position than it was at the time of his inauguration. So I'm kind of moving away from Vedic astrology here. So here is the chart for the inauguration. That's the Vedic chart for. Actually, this is the Vedic chart for his inauguration. So he got inaugurated just before Mars retrograded out of sidereal Cancer. So if we look at the Western inauguration chart, Mars is exactly on the IC. So when we looked at that inauguration chart, there were concerns about war. Trump said he wanted to end wars, but how's he doing? He just decided to fire a load of rockets and stuff at the Houthis. A lot of people are questioning, why did he do that? Was it really in America's best interests? Additionally, he's realizing that it's not going to be quite so easy to end the war in Ukraine. Plus, Mars conflict is not just about military conflict; it's about economic conflict. So there's the Mars on the IC. So he's actually having the inauguration. The Trump regime is having its Mars return at the moment. So you normally think of having a Mars return after a couple of years, but because of Mars's retrograde, backs and forth retrograde motion, he's actually having he's getting a Mars return like right now. So in fact, today is the Mars return of the Trump administration, and this is the chart for the return. And on the surface, it doesn't necessarily look so bad. I mean, there's Mars in the 6th. Mars works quite well in the 6th. I think Mars is supposed to joy in the 6th. So Mars is square Chiron. Saturn is relatively close to the ascendant, but I don't think on the surface that Mars return is particularly significant. What is significant is when we relocate that Mars return. So let's relocate that Mars return to Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. So when we relocate it, we find that Mars is exactly on the ascendant in Kiev. We've got Saturn, we've got a Venus-Saturn conjunction on the midheaven. We've got the North Node on the midheaven. So it's actually quite an aggressive chart. We set it for Kiev, and this may indicate that over the next couple of months, the regime is going to be having all sorts of issues with Ukraine because it relates to the regime's Mars. Mars in the regime's chart is where the regime is trying to assert itself. And yeah, it might not be easy, and this will be perhaps the focus of Trump, and we'll perhaps start to realize that Mars on the IC in the inauguration chart kind of contradicts Trump's claims that he is going to try to bring peace. I think he probably does want to bring peace, but circumstances may thwart that. Plus, you've got the deep state. I mean, Trump thinks he's can come up against the deep state, but the state is particularly deep when it comes to foreign affairs. So anyway, those are a few thoughts on Mars moving into Cancer, moving into sidereal Cancer. And I'm sorry if I've complicated things, but I just wanted to give you some idea about the different ways in which one can look at transits and planets changing sign. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be extremely grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.